Hi, it's Mr. Brough here, just posting a video about after the end of the Civil War. So at the end of the English Civil War, there wasn't really a plan to kill Charles at this point. The war hadn't really been fought to kill the king. The war had been fought to try and reduce the excesses of the power of a tyrannical king. And so what was needed was a settlement so that England could carry on as it had done for centuries before, with Parliament and King working together based on an agreed settlement. The difficulty was that different groups of people had different ideas about what that settlement should look like. Charles obviously had his very clear views on how little he wanted to compromise, but the problem was that Parliament was divided. There were lots of different groups. There were Presbyterians in Parliament who wanted a state church along the lines of the church in Scotland. There were Protestant, more independent people who didn't really want a state church. You had the army, and the army were very concerned about being owed back pay, etc. And the army really, in one sense, were very powerful because obviously they had won the war, so they had their military might. So it was very difficult for Parliament to agree on a set of demands, and Charles knew that, and Charles therefore basically stalled for times in his usual disingenuous, dishonest way. So Parliament set down some proposals called the Newcastle proposals. Charles took ages replying to this, didn't really reply. Oh, sorry, Dex is being... Dex, are you okay? Dex? Hello. Say hello to everyone, Dex. Dex? So, anyway, yeah. Where were we? Yeah, so the Newcastle proposals didn't really work. Charles was then moved. He was moved to the Midlands. He was then moved down to the Isle of Wight. And as I say, there are all these divisions in Parliament about how best to deal with Charles. So you have something called the Putney debates, which Cromwell kind of presides over, where the army, etc., are discussing the best way of a settlement of what England would look like after everything had been agreed on. And so there is just this period, really, where the war is over, but Charles is alive, and people are trying to find their way to some kind of political settlement. For Parliament, it has to include limiting Charles's power in quite a significant way, because if they don't, he'll come after them, and they'll all end up being executed for treason. And in the end, actually, it's Charles, as usual, who gets it all wrong, because he's in Carisbrooke Castle on the Isle of Wight, and he negotiates with the Scots for them to start a second civil war. He says he'll give the Scots a Presbyterian church for 3 years. The Scots are happy with this because they've got the Presbyterian church. Charles is happy with this because he thinks he can get out of jail and he can carry on as he was before. And unfortunately for the Scots, and unfortunately for Charles, the Second Civil War is a disaster. They are roundly defeated wherever they fight by Parliament, and it's at this point really that Cromwell and Parliament and the army decide that Charles is a man of blood, and that he essentially is responsible for the killing of English people. So the decision is made to put him on trial. Cromwell sees it as providential. You know, the Parliament has twice defeated Charles in battle, albeit the second time Charles wasn't actually leading his men because he was in jail. And so Cromwell's view is, well, maybe this is God saying England shouldn't have a king. So Charles is put on trial. Before the trial, there is a army colonel, Colonel Pride, who prevents any supporters of Charles getting into Parliament. So the people who are left to make a decision on Charles's guilt or otherwise are called the Rump, the bit of Parliament that's left behind. Charles actually does a really good job of defending himself in Parliament because it's basically a show trial. However, they wouldn't have had the trial if they'd have thought there was a serious chance of Charles being acquitted. He is found guilty, and in January 1649, he is beheaded. And therefore, for the first time in English history, England, including obviously as well Scotland and Ireland and Wales, don't have a king. Okay, I hope that helps.